Welcome back to the morning edition. And before we begin today's conversation, the next conversation, that's it, let's take a listen to what the Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Taiwo Udili, told lawmakers while defending the federal government's budget or federal government's borrowing strategy before the Senate. Well, we're sorry. We'll be bringing that statement back to you very, very shortly. But it is something that's been there, Ugochukwu, and we are hoping that quite shortly we'll bring that to you.
Well, yes, indeed. A video of the finance minister explaining while the federal government believes borrowing remains necessary, despite improvements in revenue generation, a position the government has maintained for some time, that borrowing is intended to bridge financing gaps, support infrastructure development, and sustain economic growth. But obviously, there are those who are pushing against that to say, look, we can't keep accumulating a huge debt profile. And then when you put that side by side with a good number of projects that are supposed to have been implemented in the budget, and all of this have not been addressed. So you wonder if we're borrowing money, if we keep taking all of these loans, and we have projects that are some of them not even started, some of them left abandoned, some of them not implemented at all, well, it does call for some level of scrutiny. We do have senators in the House who are also pushing back against what the Honorable Minister has said.
Well, that said, the conversation actually goes beyond borrowing itself. Before we actually move forward, let's go back now and take a listen to that clip.
Development commissions, is statutory, that has to be recognized. The laws of the National Assembly also permit different agencies to do cost of collection. So we abide by these requirements in how those items are treated. And I think the last one is to do with the incentives. The Nigerian Customs Service saying that incentives are in the region of 35 trillion naira. I will let the DG budget clarify. I have a suspicion that this is probably the value on which the incentive was granted rather than the incentive itself. But a lot of these incentives, like the distinguished share already identified correctly, are to do with importation of military equipment. They're to do with importation of food, pharmaceutical items, electronic vehicles and CNG, as well as inputs and raw materials and intermediate products into manufacturing processes. Now, why are we doing that? It's because of the Nigerian people. We do not want to overburden the Nigerian people with taxes because they will show up in the prices of goods and services, and life might just be more difficult than it needs to be. Thank you very much, distinguished senators. With your permission, DG Budget and DG DMO. Thank you very much.
Before the DG Budget and
colleagues, Honorable Minister of Finance and the Coordinating Minister of the Economy. In addition,
the voice there of Taiwo Udili, he actually was addressing the Senate at that time. Well, Miriam.
Let's get into the conversation proper now. To help us understand the issues, we're joined virtually this morning by Dr. Samson G. Simon. He's a Chief Research Fellow at Michael Strat Limited. Dr. Simon, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Good morning to you too. I guess you didn't miss the voice of Mr. Oyedele now, the minister, defending that. I'm sure you've seen that clip or probably even watched the time it happened on television. Now, you help us understand this. From your perspective, does that adequately explain why Nigeria continues to borrow despite improvements in government revenue?
All right, there are two perspectives to this.
Okay.
If you meet somebody that wants to paint the government black, he will deploy the naira value of our public debt. And it will show that these debts have ballooned since the coming of President Tinubu. But on the other hand, if you meet somebody like the Minister of Finance, who is part of the government, he wants to downplay that, and then he will bring the dollar value of the national debt. And it will show that the national debt has actually reduced. So, to be fair, external debt should be measured in USD, in US dollars, while domestic should be in Naira. Why? Because you're paying external debts in dollars and you're paying back domestic debts in Naira. That is what is fair. And if we dwell on the external debt, it has actually increased under President Tinubu. When he came to power in 2023, it was something in the region of 41 billion. It's now in the region of 50 something billion, 51 billion for last year. And according to the IMF in the Article 4, is projected to be 72.6 billion by next year. So clearly, the external debts are ballooning on President Tinubu's watch. They have increased by more than 30, or they are projected to increase by more than 30 billion by next year. Domestically, it may seem like the president is not doing badly because the increase is largely attributable to exchange rate, but this is domestic borrowing. So I don't see any reason why we should be changing it to dollars or to Naira. So anybody that is trying to be balanced will look at external debt in USD and look at domestic debt in Naira. And you don't need to bring the issue of the devaluation or whatever, right? So I think that is what is fair. And borrowings are necessary. There's no government in the world that does not borrow. The largest economy in the world today is the United States. And its national debt is more than 100% of GDP. China is the second largest economy. It also has humongous debt burden. So all countries borrow. But what matters is what you use your borrowings for. Are you using these borrowings well? In Nigeria, we always claim that we claim the same thing, that it's not you borrowing, it's how you use your debts that actually matter. But sadly, we have not been using the debts in a way that you say, all right, you have borrowed, like between 2023 and next year now, we are projected to have incurred 30 billion in external borrowings. What exactly worth 30 billion can you see around? Hardly. So I'm not saying they are not using the money at all, but the benefits are not commensurate to the costs or to the borrowings that we have incurred. And these borrowings will definitely not be paid back by the current government. It's going to be there for probably for generations to come. So we have to be really, we have to be accountable. The government has to be accountable. It has to be responsible. It has to ensure that it borrows for good reasons. It should make sure that whatever it's borrowing is being used judiciously.
Right, Mr. Simon. I like that you're trying to find a balance. Like you started, those who want to scrutinize and those who want to be for four might come in different ways, right? In both angles. But you're trying to find a balance in the middle, right? But then the revenues right now being generated by agencies, some have exceeded their targets in recent years. We've had statistics showing that, from 2025, if you do corresponding year, we're doing better this time. H1 has been good, but yet we're still borrowing. You've said it's not a bad thing to borrow, right? Countries in the world borrow money. But when we come back home to our Nigeria, over time, we hear money is being borrowed over and over again. The other day, we had Nigerians go on social media to flood the page of IMF to say, do not borrow money to us anymore. We don't need it because we're not seeing what the money is being used for. That has been the number one complaint of Nigerians. Why are we not seeing what these monies are being used for? You borrow money from the IMF and you say this is going to create jobs. Why aren't we seeing the jobs that will be created? We just hear the announcement. We hear that 5,000 individuals will be trained through the latest money that was borrowed. Where are we with that? Why are Nigerians not seeing this? And with even the revenues being generated recently, some agencies meeting with their target, why do we still fall back to borrowing? Why can't we use all of these revenues being generated?
Well, I remember when Taiwo's predecessor was there as Minister of Finance, Mr. Wale Edun.
Right.
And there was this news that virtually all the revenue generating agencies, whether it's the National Revenue Service or the customs, were exceeding their target. But unfortunately, I think it was last year, the revenue generated was just 1/4 of what was projected. We were expecting 40 trillion. We ended up getting 10 trillion, right? Despite these revenue generating agencies exceeding, according to them, they had exceeded their target. But the numbers that are being bandied around are gross numbers. They are not net numbers. Deductions take place from those numbers. And then secondly, our over-reliance on crude oil revenue. We sell crude oil to generate the larger chunk of government revenue. We were underperforming last year. We have been underperforming regarding that because we tend to have over-optimistic projections for oil. Whether the barrels that we produce per day, we could project, sometimes we project more than 2 billion barrels per day, and we were hardly doing 1.3, 1.2, 1.4, right? And then even the price too, we will over project it to be in a region where at the end of the day, we are not meeting those. So the oil revenue, which is the mainstay of the Nigerian state, has really not been doing well. It has not been meeting up with its target. So even though the non-oil revenue might be doing better, right, the general contribution to the coffers of the state will not really meet up with the needs of the state. And even for our budget, sometimes we project certain amount of revenue, right? No, I'm going outside oil now. Generally, we tend to be over optimistic in our projections. We tend to be, it's going to be positive, but it should be grounded. The positivity should be grounded in reality. Sadly, for our budget, it's not grounded in reality. And this mistake we keep making it every year. We don't seem to learn from that. And that's why we tend to have these constant deficits and we tend to have this accumulation of national debts over time. So a lot needs to be done. Thankfully, we have exceeded recently the data that came out. We have exceeded the OPEX benchmark, the OPEX quota given to us for the first time. But even with that, it's not good enough.
But Mr. Simon, I like to remind you that this year data release also said non-oil revenue hit about 75% of federation funds. Non-oil were doing well. Aside dependence on oil, we had our non-oil revenues who was coming in at the time, and it was doing very well. Non-oil sectors, even tapping into informal sector as well. But if we have the non-oil sector doing better, and 75% of federation funds is coming from non-oil, why are we still at the point where, even with the borrowed money, with the revenues generated by agencies and non-oil revenues also doing well, why are we still looking like, well, where we are, we're not moving forward? And how can Nigeria even measure that we're even doing anything?
All right, let's look at 2026 budget.
All right.
We're talking about a budget of more than 60 trillion. What's the projected revenue for this year? Is around half of that. It's 30-something trillion. So even if these revenue generating agencies exceed, let's say they exceed their projected, expected, the projected or the expected revenues from them, we will still need to borrow because the expected revenue is supposed to just cover like half of expected government spending for the year. So unless if they do exceedingly well, maybe like 200% of twice what they are projected to do, that's when we don't need to borrow. But as long as they meet their target and just maybe within the region of that target, the budget is being planned in such a way that almost half of the spending, the money to pay for those spending will be generated from borrowing. So we still need to borrow. That does not solve the problem. It helps because we're meeting some revenue targets, but it doesn't stop us from borrowing. So
but the Nigerian people don't seem to see the effects. If you say we're meeting all of this, the Nigerian people are not seeing it. They can't say that, yes, this money is being borrowed was used for this, and I can see that it's benefiting me as a Nigerian. The Nigerian people have questions. Why are we not seeing that? Why is it not trickling down to even the ordinary Nigerian?
We're a huge country. We're a country of more than 230 million people. And what is our budget? If you look at our budget per capita, it's arguably the worst you can find in the world. So we need to do more. I think it was the economic advisor to the president, sure, was that his name? Faswa. that was saying that our budget should be maybe 200 trillion in naira. It should even exceed that if we compare our country with other countries. But we cannot even do that because what are we generating? You need funding for these budgets, right? So we are doing terribly when it comes to revenue generation. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done. If Nigerians has to see impact, then we need to be doing far, far more than what we're doing. And I'm not saying the government should just go and make a budget of 200 trillion because less than 1/10 will be generated from revenue. So you have to look for 90% in borrowings. And even the borrowings, where will you find such? So we need to fix our budget, we need to fix our revenue generation, and then we need to judiciously spend money. It's not just about having 30 trillion or 60 trillion. How well do you spend this money? Do you prioritize? Do you direct these resources to the most important sectors of the economy that benefit probably all Nigerians, almost all Nigerians? Or this money is being siphoned by some people in government? So all these things they matter. And there's lack of transparency. I know we have improved from where we're coming from, but we need more transparency. If you say the Nigerian Revenue Service is exceeding its revenue target, we need to know what is the gross, what is the net, what is actually coming to the coffers of the state. Don't just impress us with big numbers. Tell us exactly what is happening, and Nigerians will better understand what is happening.
Mr. Simon, if I let my colleague come in right now, what do you say to the fact that we have a budget, a fiscal budget being carried over year in, year out? This is 2026. We've still not implemented the budgets for last year, even the year before. The one for this year is just merely how much? Is it 30% of it? Ministries are saying they are not being funded. Just for health, the other day he said just 50 million naira is being released, or is it education now? It's been released to him in the budget. What do you say to that?
You know, this is a terrible thing. The people, anybody in government will try to defend it, and understand where they're coming from. What they're saying is that it's better for us to continue the budget, like 2025 budget should be continued in 2026, so that whatever we wanted to do in 2025 that we couldn't do, we should do in 2026. But it just shows that you're a bad planner, you don't know how to budget. Sorry, I may come across as being harsh, but that's the reality. Global best practice says your budget should be grounded in reality. And the spending you're projecting to do within a budget cycle should be done within that budget cycle. Occasionally, few instances, you might have to exceed that budget cycle. It happens. But it should not be like almost everything, particularly for capital budget, the capital spending in Nigeria. So that's really bad. And I'm happy, I think there was a time the president said that will be corrected. So thank God I understand that this is a mistake. It needs to be corrected. So you might be in government. If I'm in government today, I might not be this way talking, but one should be factual. Even if you're in government, you don't want to talk negative of government and you're serving him, you have to deploy only the facts and don't just defend anything because you're in that government. It doesn't make sense for us to be doing 3 budgets within a year. It doesn't make sense. There's no advanced economy, no sophisticated economy, no serious economy that does that.
All right. At the heart of the conversation are just a whole number of issues ranging from ministries, departments, and agencies who have not been able to receive funds, to even some senators who are saying that monies allocated for constituency projects, have not been released. And I mean, this is something that concerns Nigerians, the ordinary Nigerian out there. You had called for transparency, at some point in our conversation. From the executive who prepares all of these budgets, who oversee revenue generation, to the legislators who, amends the budget, provide some sort of oversight function, and the final bus stop, which is the MDAs who are supposed to utilize these funds. Who should Nigerians hold responsible for these systemic delays, for these non-release of funds, and lack of implementation of consecutive budgets? I mean, since 2023 till date, there's always been that rollover and carryover into the next year. So who should we focus our attention on?
Everybody, but most especially the president. the buck stops at the president's desk. He has to take full responsibility for that. It's his government. He was the one that was elected by Nigerians. Nigerians did not elect the Minister of Finance. Nigerians did not elect the MDAs. The MDAs and the minister and so on and so forth are there to help the president to execute his policies and his programs. So 100%, this is on President Tinubu, right? He might not have caused this directly, but it's on his watch. And it's his responsibility to fix it. He has the powers. If a particular minister is not doing the job that is expected of him, it is within the president's powers to sack that person and bring somebody that will give him what he desires. So 100%, this is on Tinubu, right? The president of Nigeria. And he has to get the right set of people to work for him, whether within the MDAs. Why do you think we give so much powers to the president? Because we're looking for a scapegoat, we're looking for a fall guy, in other words, right? Because he's the person we are holding responsible. So he has to do everything possible. And thankfully, the president concedes some of these problems sometimes. You have to give it to him. But conceding is one thing, then fixing it is another. And I think it needs all these problems about our budget need to be fixed. The president needs to act urgently. I never thought Awole Edun would be eased out. So it shows that the president is determined to get things done. So let's give Taiwo the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he'll do things differently. Maybe we'll see better results on his watch. And if Taiwo doesn't give the results to, it is still the president's prerogative to change Taiwo or the current Minister of Finance to somebody that will give the results. So you have to get people that will give you the results, whether within the MDAs or within the fiscal authorities or even advisors around him.
Right.
The buck stops at his desk
Dr.
and he has
Samson,
to do the right thing.
Before we let you go, Dr. Samson, quickly, other than the defense that Oyedele has put up, defending why the federal government borrowing strategy before the Senate and all, other than that, what would you have also loved to hear from Oyedele? Other than defense, staying on the defensive side. Of course, he's working with the government, he's in the current administration, it's his job to do all of defensing. But other than that, what would you have expected him to also say aside that?
Yeah, I think Taiwo was just downplaying the problem. If you or I were there, would have done the same thing. But he should have gone further by beyond just downplaying it to telling Nigerians the solution to these problems. It's not just, and he too was doing the same thing that I mentioned initially. He was talking about the devaluation, the net value of the national debt, and so on and so forth. He's just dwelling on the problem. What we need is the way forward. What we need is a solution. What do you have as the coordinating minister for the economy? What things should we expect differently? How should we expect our lives to improve? That was what I was expecting from him, beyond just playing the problem and playing politics with it.
Dr. Samson G. Simon, Chief Research Fellow at the Michael Strat Limited. Thank you for your time indeed this morning on the Morning Edition.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your day. And of course, as Nigeria continues to balance growing development needs with increasing debt obligations, the discussion remains focused on one central issue: how to build a stronger, more sustainable public finance system and support economic growth while safeguarding future generations.